How are you doing, everybody? And welcome to this session of our Alpha class. And we're going to talk about, is there a conflict between Christianity and science? I'm reminded of the little movie that I watched. Love this movie. It was called Nacho Libre. Have you ever seen that movie? And there was this character named Skeletor, the skinny wrestler that partnered with Nacho Libre. And there was a point in the movie where he says, I am a man of science. I don't believe in God. Can you imagine? Here is probably a fairly pervasive thought if you watch the media, if you do a lot of reading of people who are critical of Christianity. They are going to propose and pronounce, and they're going to promote this idea that science and Christianity are incompatible with each other. What we want to do is we want to actually ask this question and maybe even examine some of the thoughts, maybe even examine some of what nature tells us. Is there a conflict? Can you believe in science and God at the same time? There's going to be some that'll tell you absolutely not. We would like to propose something different. If you listen to the media, you're going to hear a very marked, aggressive attack against God. People who don't believe or don't have a strong belief in God tend to want to attack the very thing that they don't have quite an understanding of. The media thrives on controversy, doesn't it? They want you to listen to them. They want you to read their magazine. They want you to watch their show. We call this media. And how do they get you to watch it? By creating controversy. The more controversial something is, the more apt you're going to be listening to it. And so the fastest way that media outlets are going to get you to listen to something is to put out there this idea, hey, we have a controversy, we have a tension, we've got this, we're going to say this because we know you're attracted to the fight. And we want to talk about it, and we want to increase our viewership. We saw it during this political season where just over and over controversies were raised. We see it still. Time magazine had an article that was one of their more famous articles that Time has ever written, and it was called God versus Science. And they wanted you to think that this was a death match, that this was a cage match, and only one was going to survive. Was it going to be God, or was it going to be science? Because they're incompatible. They cannot coexist. Both of them cannot be right. Isn't that what they're saying? Critics will say that it's always going to clash. If you are a man of science, then you're really kind of dumb if you believe in religion. That's how they're going to try to make people feel. Well, the idea of we're studied and we're learned and we've examined and we have thought through, and God cannot be a part of this picture. Let's take a look at that, can we? What's the evidence say? Can there be something that we look at as just part of the bigger picture? Certainly there has been periods of time when science was in conflict with Christian beliefs. We can go back to, for example, Galileo. Galileo was a very devout Christian. And he was a mathematician, he was an astronomer, and he then discovered that the earth is not at the center of the universe. That in fact, the planets revolve around the sun. And this was heresy, according to the church. We have come to learn and we can believe now, yes, we've discovered that in fact, planets revolve around the sun. And in fact, there are galaxies and there are millions and billions of suns in our own galaxy, and that there are millions and billions of galaxies that are other than our own Milky Way galaxy. So yes, we can readily agree that science and Christian thoughts have been at times at odds with each other. In fact, Galileo was punished for it. He spent the last 8 years of his life in quarantine, in house arrest, because of what the church deemed Galileo's discovery as something being so antithetical to the Christian belief that they basically locked him up. Other things, for example, like the Scopes trial in 1925. You may not have remembered this, but in 1925, John C. Scopes began to teach evolution in his public school classroom. And he was fined and he was tried for that. And he was found guilty of teaching evolution until it was overturned. And so, yes, all of a sudden now here's again tension and controversy. Even modern day scientific study can explain everything that there is to know about whether science and Christianity are at odds. But here's some food for thought. Here's some things that maybe we can think about a little bit. It was the Judeo-Christian belief that set many, many things in motion. We are and can be proud of what Christianity has brought to the world. I know that I am. I am proud of the facts of what Christianity and the Judeo-Christian belief system has brought to the world. All of our laws today that we live by have come from Judeo-Christian beliefs, that we are created equal, that we are all under the rule of law, that nobody is above the law. It's Judeo-Christian beliefs that have elevated the status of women. If we are all created equal, then women are also equal. And before Christianity, that wasn't true. Women were deemed and they were treated differently. It was during this Judeo-Christian belief and this system that allowed the emergence of scientific thought. Now think about this. Where does scientific thought come from? Science is going to say things are predictable. Science is going to say we can examine and we can prove and we can see things that are going to say this is one of the laws of nature. Well, how did that even begin? Can you think that if there is just capricious and random events in the world, how could we be scientific about it? If everything was just random, if everything was just because it's capricious, nothing works the same way every single time, well, then there would be no science, because you couldn't determine what a variable is and what a constant is to determine what is true and what's not true. But Judeo-Christian ethics and Judeo-Christian beliefs brought about the idea that we serve one God. Now, before this, there were beliefs in many gods, but we serve one God. And if there was one God, then there was one entity that was creating everything. And if it was only one thing that was creating anything, then there was going to be order, there was going to be systems, and there was going to be predictability, because everything was created by one God. And so the idea of science emerging from the idea that we believe in one God is very, very true to our history. The belief in one God brings about the idea that God is a God of order, and He's a God that is predictable, and that we could expect order and intelligence because it comes from one God. Now, the world is worthy of investigation. I am a scientific type of person. I love science. I love trying to find out the whys of something. I remember as a child, one of the things that I would do just constantly was collect things. And I would collect all kinds of things. I would collect rocks and I would collect coins, but I also would collect dead things. And I would dissect. I mean, even as an early elementary school student, I would take things and I would dissect them. After they died, of course. I wouldn't kill them, but after they would have died. And I would have jars, and I would put alcohol in those jars, and I would put different things in those jars just because I thought it was kind of cool. I had my chemistry set that Mom and Dad bought me, and so now it was pouring these chemicals together to see what would happen. But I just discovered early I wanted to know a lot about how the world worked. The world was worthy of investigation, because there's an evidence that it was orderly and it was designed and it was made. And so we became scientific because of this curiosity of our own nature that we expected to see in the world that we were living and a part of. We expected to say, hey, this is how it's happening. And because it happens this way, I can investigate it. And they believed that it was orderly, that they believed that it was intelligent. They believed that there was a law of nature. Why? Because there was a legislator of that law. Somebody who said, this is how it's going to work. And so again, just wanting to point out that it was the Judeo-Christian belief system that allowed science to even emerge in the first place. We couldn't be capable of any kind of study if this wasn't true. Now, one of the things that we want to just take a look at is, what do we believe? One, we believe as Christians that God is transcendent. What does that mean? God is not a part, He is above and not only just involved in. Transcendent means I sit above it. We believe that God sits above nature, separate from nature. Therefore, experimentation can be justified. Let me point. A lot of belief systems before this believed that God was in nature and that God was in matter, the stuff that we're made of, and that this matter was a part of God and God was in it, and that's where God was. And there were some belief systems that also thought that matter was evil. If it was physical, then it was evil, that all physical matter is evil. Therefore, we should resist it. We should come against it. The Christian worldview though, said, hey, matter is not evil. Matter is good. How many of you can testify to that? Attest to the idea, yeah, matter is good. I'm glad that there is light. I'm glad that I'm sitting on a chair. And the other belief is that, and God is not matter. God is above matter. The belief that science was born from Christians and Christian belief is a part of our entire history. Philosophers, scientists, historians, professors, all have been scientists and devout Christians at the same time. That they were able to say and to see there is no contradiction. Yes, we're learning, and we're learning a lot. One of the things that I love about archaeology, when we discover different things about the ancient world, ancient archaeology, is that there has never, ever been one archaeological discovery and find that has been a direct contradiction to what the Bible says. Can you imagine? Never in the history of our world has there been one archaeological discovery that contradicted what the Bible says. And there has been many, many times when archaeology has actually, in fact, validated what the Bible has said. For example, just one that I just read about recently. There was a belief that Pontius Pilate was never a real part of history. Pontius Pilate was the governor that ruled Judea and was in fact the one who tried Jesus. Just recently, there has been plates, there has been tablets where Pontius Pilate's name was written as the Roman governor. What does that do? It validates the Bible's account. It didn't contradict it. It validated. The cities of the old ancient times, Jericho, for example, finding the archaeological site of Jericho and seeing its massive walls and seeing that, in fact, Jericho's walls didn't just topple over or disintegrate, but they were actually somehow miraculously pushed down, validates the biblical account. And so many, many historians, scientists, and philosophers are also firm believers in God. Physicist Peter Hodgson stated, Christianity provided just the right beliefs to make science essential. Historian Herbert Butterfield said, science is a child of Christian thought. Philosopher John McMurray said, science is the legitimate child of a great religious movement, and its genealogy goes all the way back to Jesus. We believe and know that some of our greatest scientific minds were also Christians. Copernicus, the discoverer of modern astronomy, he said, the best and most orderly workman of all is God. And we see that in nature. Every time we look, every time we see nature, we are awed by how great the design is. Stephen Hawking, who was a professed atheist, said that if 10 minutes after the Big Bang occurred, there was one billionth of a difference in the amount of matter in the world, then the world would have collapsed 10 years after the Big Bang. Can you see the precision of everything about this world? We are situated as the third planet from the sun, where the climate is exactly where it needs to be. Is that happenstance? Is there more faith in the fact that God did this and created something out of nothing? Or do people, and many do, said, I put more faith that nothing created something out of nothing? And that is the crux of the matter. Did something become created and designed the way we see it by a God of design? Or did nothing create something out of nothing that now has become this beautifully designed world and planet and solar system that we live in? Let me go through some others. Kepler, who developed and discovered modern optics. Sir Isaac Newton, the laws of gravity. Optics, astronomy, calculus, was more than anything else, according to his statement, a theologian, a believer in God. Faraday, electromagnetic induction. Louis Pasteur, pasteurization. Lister, the developer of anesthetics, how we can have painless surgery, was a believer and a Christian. Mendel, the founder of genetics, was a devout Christian. And Dr. Francis Collins, a modern day, wonderfully devout Christian, in charge of the Human Genome Project, discovering every gene that is in the human body, the billions of genes, and identifying them in the human body. Over 2,000 scientists working on this project. And Dr. Francis Collins saying, I am a believer. I believe in God, and I believe it was God who gave me the thoughts that allowed me to discover the secret to the Human Genome Project. Let's talk about evolution and creation. Have you ever thought of just how disparate evolution? Can I believe in evolution and creation at the same time? Let me kind of bring about the idea of evolution, microevolution. We see microevolution. What is microevolution? Microevolution is the changes that are within one species of animal. Macroevolution is the belief that one species turns into a different species. Macroevolution says, well, that's when apes then became humans. That's what macroevolution. That's when a fish became something different than a fish. That's when a bird became something different. They changed species. The Bible will talk about that every seed will produce its own kind. And so macroevolution is what we just kind of want to have a little discussion about. We, as Christians who also believe in creation, can say, yes, microevolution, we can see there's adaptations. That the horse, for example, has gotten bigger over the decades and the centuries because of different things, maybe because of diet. We as humans actually may have become different because of microevolution and adaptations. Birds, we know, have changed the size of their beaks based on the food sources that was available to them. We see in our world many, many examples of microevolution. But have we ever seen in one fossil where one animal then became a different animal? And you would then begin to say, well, what about evolution? What about what the Genesis chapter 1 account says? Evolution and creation. Is there a conflict? Is there an irreconcilable conflict between evolution and the creation story? Well, we know what Genesis 1 says. Genesis says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And when we read Genesis 1, how do we hear and understand Genesis 1? And God said, let there be light. And God said, let there be. And on the seventh day, he rested. What I would like to propose and what I would like to share is that can there be different understandings that Christians, well-meaning, Bible-loving Christians have about the Genesis 1 account? The first one is, did the earth and everything in it be created in a literal 6 days? The Hebrew word for day is the word yom, Y-O-M. Yom in Hebrew has many varied definitions, and one of them is a very long time. Could the first day, and God said, let there be light, be a long time before the second day that God created the heavens and the earth and the firmaments and the skies? We want to tend in a literal interpretation that says, well, that was one day, a 24-hour period of time. And well-meaning Christians believe that, and we don't begrudge that at all, because God is able to do anything that he wants, because he's transcendent above nature. He's transcendent and above his creation. For example, when he created Adam and Eve, how old was Adam? How old was Eve when they were formed and created? They were adults. They weren't babies. They weren't newborn babies. God created Adam and Eve already as older adults, as full functioning adults. I mean, if you were to say, well, how old are you? They wouldn't very well be able to say whatever it was, but they weren't one. They weren't newborn. When God created the earth, could he be created the earth already having age to it? I'm saying God is able to do anything. How many years passed by if the sun wasn't formed until the fourth day? So there wasn't a 24-hour period of time that could even be measured before the fourth day. How could there be an understanding of what the time difference is between the first day and the second day when the Hebrew word for yom does not define it as a 24-hour day? What I'm saying is that Genesis gives us the information that we need of the biblical creation account. It doesn't give us a scientific accounting of how things were formed. We don't need to be so dogmatic. What does that mean about what we believe? Dogmatic. This is what it says, and this is what I believe. And yes, for those things that are in the Bible that are very clear, I'm going to say absolutely yes. When there can be a difference of understanding between what the first day was and what the first day second was, then do we need to be so dogmatic? Do we need to say things like, well, then I don't believe any of that? And this is where scientists are having their conflict and their tension with. Genesis 1 does not answer the question of how and when. The Bible is not a philosophical, it is not a scientific book. It is a theological book. It is God's story about himself to us. And how God did it and when God did it can be a question. And scientists are going to say those things happened millions and millions of years ago. And it might have. Do I have to lose my belief in science or my belief in Christianity to believe one or the other? I'm saying you don't. I'm saying we can be learned men. We can be men who exercise our mind greatly, who use our minds well in all kinds of different scientific studies, and still be people who believe that God created the heavens and the earth. And what we know is that God didn't answer the how and the when, but he did answer the why and the who. I did it. I made it. And I made it for you. And I made it for you so that you would have a place to live in. And Adam and Eve, I made a garden, and it's perfect and it's beautiful. And yes, I made you with a free will. No, I didn't give you the how I made it. I just spoke it. And I didn't give you the when did I make it. I just made it. And how long it took certainly can be debatable. And it's okay. That's okay. Let it be debatable. I'm very comfortable with saying, I don't know. I don't know. I believe in God with all of my heart. And everything that I see gives me the evidence that there was a designer and a creator. But how and when? I don't know. But is it all that important? Maybe not. The Bible is not primarily a scientific book. It's primarily a theological book of God reaching out to man so that he could communicate his desire for a relationship with us. And when we look at it that way, we see a beautiful, beautiful story. Science does not prove or disprove the personal beliefs that we have of the world. I just want to say it this way. I am convinced that all of us who come to God must come to God through faith. Through faith. And faith is never going to completely be proven by what my mind is able to think. He who comes to God must believe that he is. Now, science is going to provide many, many answers for us. Will it ever prove the existence of God? Well, that's up to your perspective. If you believe that God is, then you will see that the proof that you need is all around us. If you are saying, I need proof that God exists, outside of what I see and outside of what I experience, then you will be able in your mind to say, then I don't believe in God because I don't see the proof of God. And yet, God says, he who comes to me must come to me by faith. Will it ever fit inside these ears of mine that God, here is the scientific proof that you are alive, that you exist? Well, if that were the case, then where would faith be? Faith is the belief of things that I'm hoping for and the evidence of things that I do not see. I don't see God, but I believe he's there. I don't see personality, but I know you have one. I don't see breath, but I know it's there. And so when I come to God knowing by faith that He is there, and that science and my Christian beliefs are compatible. They are not directly contradictory. And I hope that you believe that as well. Thank you very much, everybody. God bless you. I hope you enjoy this discussion, and we'll talk about it more as we proceed forward. Have a great day. Bye-bye.